ladies and gentlemen, independent Americans around the country and around the world, happy Super Bowl week. I am so thrilled, honored, and privileged to bring a guest who is a Super Bowl champion, a champion for veterans, a champion for independence, and a champion for America. Joining us on Independent Americans, finally, the great and powerful Rocky Bleier is here.
Well, that's the best introduction I've ever had, so thank you very much.
Hey, for you, Rocky, I'll follow you around and intro you all day long. Any day.
Thank you.
It is such a tremendous honor to have you on the show, sir.
Well, thank you.
We've been, working together on the independent stuff in Pennsylvania. We have a lot of friends in common, and I think you're just an incredible inspiration, a role model. And the word hero gets thrown around a lot, but you are a true American hero, and I'm honored to have you on, especially at this moment in American history.
Well, thank you. And obviously, there's a lot going on at this moment in American history from across the board. But I think, one of the things you're talking about, the independent and the independent votes. And so I was so very happy to be able to be a voice in that movement of some nature. And how important it was really for veterans specifically to have a voice in the primary races that take place in Pennsylvania. Past history there, that Pennsylvania was one of 6 states that did not have that voting right. And it just didn't make sense, like politics. It just doesn't make sense what should naturally happen, what should be. But somebody's got to take the torch, as they say, or be part of that movement to be able to at least make aware of the situation. And a lot of, at least my position, or having to be put into a position of expectation, but having served and maybe having a voice of some nature, or at least a presence, and all of a sudden it becomes a responsibility, I feel, just to be able to use that platform to say, okay, I just think this is wrong, whatever that situation might be. In this case, just to be able to get the word out and hope that somebody listens, and to say, hey, from a military point of view, the majority of veterans, are independent voters, only because of the position that they've been put in by themselves, and to say, okay, fine, I fight for freedom, I fight for this country, I fight for America, I'm not fighting for the Democrats, I'm not fighting for Republicans, and so I should at least have a say-so in the primary. Now, I have to decide which I can choose on the voting matter, but at least give me a seat at the table to have my voice heard. And so, obviously, that became so very important. And with the help of so many people in this movement, we got it passed. And so now that there's a voice at that table, and that becomes part of it. It's not as if I'm on a platform stumping for everything that changes, but if you can use a situation, or if you can be put into a situation where you might have a say-so, and or somebody may listen to you, and that becomes part of your responsibility and our responsibility as Americans to be able to stand up for what you believe, and I think what makes common sense.
Rocky, you've been standing up for what you believe in your whole life, and leading and setting an example. And I want to go deeper into the independent stuff. I want to talk about, obviously, football and the Super Bowl coming up. I want to talk about the state of affairs in America and your personal example and your personal experience. But let me go back to a question I ask of all of our guests. Where are you, Rocky, and how are you?
Okay, I'm in Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania, obviously. And so it was like, well, where am I going? I always tell people, I said, well, I grew up in Appleton, Wisconsin, which is just about 30 miles south of Green Bay. And the people said, well, why did you go back to Wisconsin? Well, because I didn't play for the Packers.
Right.
So, you make a home here, and I've been here since I've been a rookie in 1968, and, and it becomes home. It it becomes part of who you are and part of what had been established here. It's a great area and a great town, and so I've been very fortunate in that regards.
I have a lot of love for Pittsburgh. I had family growing up in Gibsonia, and I actually have baby pictures of me in Steelers gear. They tried to convert me. It didn't work. I stayed a Giants fan, but have a deep connection to Pittsburgh, and I've been honored to know Bill Cower, who was on the board with us at IAVA, and as a friend and a mentor, and so many other folks connected to the Steelers and to football. But I also want to go back to ask you, the second part of that question. It's been a wild couple of years. COVID, all the political unrest. You're out there doing a lot of things. How are you when you look at this time in the world? How are you doing in the middle of all this?
Actually, fine. So as far as COVID is concerned, and so it's like everybody else in business, whatever it is, and so we had a setback. Now, my primary business, I'm in the construction business here, so we are a service-disabled, veteran-owned small business, and so we're a minority status since the beginning of that program. Back in 2004, we established ourselves, and throughout those years, we've built mistakes and been involved and so on, and see the evolution. And so through COVID, and I say through COVID time at least, we were busy. I mean, we had personnel on jobs, and so we were able to pay, salaries and keep people employed, and so on and so on. So in that regards, that was very fortunate, and so we've been able to come out of that in a grand city, and on ourselves, or find ourselves in a position that it just like I say this, and it's like not to take advantage of being a service disabled company, but that was an opportunity. But like all businesses, no matter what it may be, you have to be able to build on it. How do you build on it? You build on it by your reputation. You build on it by the job you do, the quality of people that you have, making sure that the project is done correctly. If you need to fix it, you fix it. If it costs you money, it costs you money to do it. But you don't take advantage of the situation, and hopefully, you build on that reputation. And so I got some wonderful, wonderful people, and like every organization, whether it be a sports team, it's all about the personnel that you have, the people that you have. And of course, I take all the credit, which is rightly so, as an entrepreneur. but they're on the job. They're out there. They're interfacing with those who employ us, and so they've done a wonderful job. So that's basically what I get a chance to do.
Yeah, Rocky, everything that you've done in your life, your business career, your all the philanthropy work you do, your football career, your military career, it's all been the stuff of legend. I think appropriately so. When I was coming out of the military, I knew about your story, and I asked you before we went. I believe you are the only Purple Heart recipient to ever win a Super Bowl. Is that right?
Yes, as a matter of fact, yes, I am. If that's a distinction, yes. That's why you're going to say, well, he's a recipient of X number of badges and so on, and the Purple Heart isn't really the one you want,
right?
But sometimes it goes with the territory.
But notable in that there's been, especially in the newer generation, so few people who've served in the military have gone on to play in professional sports. Obviously we know about Alejandro Villanueva and Pat Tillman and others, but you left a professional career to serve in Vietnam. You were wounded, and then you went back and won 4 Super Bowls. I mean, this is an incredible journey that you have told so many times. But I want to ask you, there's also been this important intersection I don't think people fully appreciate with your role in the veterans movement. In the Vietnam era, and now in my era, and now the next era. You're good friends with our buddy Shad Meshat, who's been a guest on this show. who I adore, and the Madman is a legend. I love him very dearly. But you've been in this arena and in this space in a way that really very few, if anybody else, has. So when you look back on it now, Rocky, that intersection of your military career and playing professional sports and your activism, what do you take away? And then when you think about young veterans who are coming home, who are maybe trying to navigate their journey, what lessons can you share with them?
I don't know if there's lessons. I think it's the transitions. Transitions are always the important aspect of our lives, no matter what they may be. They're transcending from high school to college, or high school to a profession, or high school to the military, or college into the military, or whatever, or into the business world. I mean, there's these steps that we go through. Not that one plans on it, but also one has to have, I think, somewhat of a focus, or what you want to get accomplished, or what you want to do. In my case specifically, I was fortunate to be in a position, and I've always told people is that, like sports or like in the military, at times, it's what the unit does. It's what the team does. And as successful as that team may be, you get recognized for your contribution to that success. So I'm very fortunate to have some great leaders, coaches that drove a team, or got them into a position to be able to be recognized, or to win. And so coming out of high school, we'd never lost a football game. I get a chance to go to Notre Dame. Okay, now the point of, or the decision of going to Notre Dame wasn't necessarily because if you look prior to that time for me in 1964 as a freshman at University of Notre Dame, they did not have a great schedule, in the latter part of the 50s and into the early part of the 60s. And so it wasn't on my radar as the only thing that I knew about Notre Dame was Kurt Gowdy, that had an hour special on Sunday mornings with the Notre Dame games. And so that was the only thing I knew about Notre Dame. Okay, fine. And being a good Catholic boy raised in Appleton, Wisconsin, it was kind of there. But there was a family friend. There was who owned a restaurant, who had gone to Notre Dame, and so he invited my dad and I down to a game to see the University of Wisconsin. And so that was my senior year in high school. And so I kind of saw the school. Okay, fine. What did I know? I'm 18 years old. I don't know anything. I was 17 at the time. Okay, I wasn't even 18 yet. And so they offered me a scholarship. Well, I don't know why, because he wasn't going to be the new coach. And so ultimately, and I think this is part of the reason, is that their recruiting coach, or their recruiter who recruited Wisconsin area, probably gave me the best piece of advice. And I share this because we all have to share advice. And he said, listen, you're going to get a lot of scholarship offers, from smaller schools, Big Ten schools, University of Wisconsin, Minnesota, Illinois, et cetera, et cetera. He said, and every time you go and visit one of those schools, they're going to roll out the red carpet, show you a good time and everything that this. So by the time you have to make that decision, maybe some 5, 6, 7 weeks later after you visited these schools, on what criteria are you going to base your choice? He said, my suggestion is choose 3 schools that you would like to graduate from. Not necessarily play football, but graduate from. Only because the fact that anything can happen during that period of time, you get injured or whatever it might be, but at least you have a scholarship coming out of that. And I thought that made such common sense to me. And so, obviously, University of Wisconsin was one because that was my state school. Notre Dame, second. And then we had a family friend that had gone to Boston College, another Catholic school. And so they said, hey, I can get you into Boston College. Or to go have an interview. And I said, okay, fine. First one was Boston College. Went out there, loved Boston. Not necessarily Boston College,
Right.
but the area. Then I liked that. Went to Wisconsin. It was too big, It just and then went to Notre Dame, and it kind of fit. And then so here it goes. Then, like every good Catholic was taught to do, what do? You go to church, you get on your knees, you pray for guidance and direction, and then, like every good Catholic boy, you do what your mother wants you to do, and then you go to Notre Dame. So I end up at Notre Dame. A brand new coach just came in. I mean, it wasn't as if they had a history in my hand, although
Right.
they had a heralded history before that. A brand new coach, Eric Barsegian, comes. Wow, he was from Northwestern. I didn't know anything about Barsegian, but he's the brand new coach that comes in. And who would have it, but changes the course and direction of that school. He goes 9-1 his first season, and by my year, we're undefeated, and ultimately we won the national championships. Now, just to put it in perspective of today, there was no playoff games back then. There was
Right.
a mythical national championship. People voted on it, but you got the distinction. And because of that, you kind of get recognized, I mean, so I wasn't the biggest, and I wasn't the fastest, and I wasn't an All-American or so on, but you were part of a successful team and whatever they saw. So I get drafted by the Steelers. I was not their first choice. Okay, just to put it in perspective. I did not make their top 10 list. I was the 417th person picked in the draft that year. I was a 16th round draft. Now, you have to understand, there were 17 rounds.
Right.
And I thought to myself, hey, at least you're not the last guy you picked. You might have a chance to make this team. And people say, well, how'd you make the team back in 1968? Well, do you remember who played for the Steelers in the 60s? That's how come I made the team, because during that period of time. And so, and as fate would have it, that's 1968. So what's happening in 1968? The Vietnam War is at its height. Most Americans endured troops. We had over 500,000 troops in Vietnam. And the draft was part of that process. And so, your 1A classification changes, or your student deferment changes to 1A classification. Now you become, and so, and being honest, I go, okay, fine. In my mind, I'm thinking, all right, the only experience I had with the draft was when I was in high school, and watching the Packers. And of course, the Packers were the dominant team during that period of time. And so I would see guys in like reserve units going to reserve meetings. You're an 18-year-old kid or 17-year-old at the time, and you go, oh, okay, fine. Now, you're just out, you're getting 1A classification. What happens? Now you're 22, and you go, well, I guess they put me in the reserve. Whoever they are, put me in the reserve. And so I said, well, obviously that did not happen. And so I got fell through the crack and got my 1A classification. And the interesting thing in that, it was...
and they sent you to Vietnam.
And they sent me to Vietnam. That's right. And they sent me to Vietnam. And so, I end up as a grunt over in Vietnam in a line unit, carrying an M79 grenade launcher. So that was, and it just, and I got to play 10, 14 games when that happened. And I got my notice, like thousands of other young men during that period of time. And it was to report the next morning. The date was like the next morning at 7 a.m. I go, I just got this. Don't think you had a week or something like this to get your stuff together. So I went down, and fortunately they gave me high blood pressure for 24 hours so I could get my affairs in order, so to speak. And then I was off to basic training and that whole part of my life.
And Rocky, I mean, it's so grounding, I think, for folks to hear about that, that immediacy of that. And my father used to tell me that his father picked up a letter and he felt in the corner and there was a subway token in it. And he looked at my father and he said, Paulie, you're going to Vietnam, right? You're getting drafted, right? And that's how they knew, because they sent you a subway token and you had to get on the train and keep going, right? And you and so many other people answered that call. Did you ever think about not going, Rocky?
Well, so yeah, as I tell people, I
You're a
said,
pro football player. You had the whole
well,
world in front of you.
so yeah, you had options, so we had options. I mean, everybody, in people had that. So what were the options? Number one, you could leave the country. Some people were going to Canada, during that period of time. Not me. Okay. Secondly, you could not show up. Consequence, you go to jail. That's even worse, right? Then you could apply as a conscientious objector to the war. You could apply. And some people came through, but coming out of Appleton, Wisconsin, what was I going to object about? So it's like this. You could join the reserve. That was 1968. Height of the war, those spots were all filled. Or you could enlist, but that was a 4-year commitment. Being drafted was only 2 years, and say, well, okay, what do I want to do? I want late to come back and play football. So you just the least option, and that's be drafted.
So if you do your time in Vietnam, which you've talked a lot about, you go to the Steelers and come back from an injury. You go on to, you and Franco Harris rush for 1,000 yards. You win 4 Super Bowls. But I think even more importantly, in my view, you have become a person that America roots for, that America trusts. I consider you, especially given your perspective now, kind of a conscience for this country. And every time I talk to you, I consider it, it's so invaluable. And I hope my kids can hear this and other people's kids can hear this. This week, the president is giving the State of the Union address. Rocky, you've been around a lot of things. You've seen a lot of things. What do you think the state of our union is? What is the state of America right now, in your view?
Well, there are some decisions that had been made by our current president that I did not view as great decisions, after the fact that he made decisions. Part of it was our leaving
Afghanistan?
Afghanistan, excuse me. Thank you. Just say leaving Afghanistan. And the way he did it and so on and so on. It was like it just, and the second part was, closing the oil drilling, dependence on oil here, and stopping. So all of a sudden, decisions that had been made based on not necessarily common sense, and not that I'm in the political world or understand what's taking place, but just from an outside force, and as an American, why, and so anyway, I'm not really necessarily looking forward to listening to this message, although I will, only because I want to see what, from his perspective, how he sees the changes that had taken place and what our position is. And I come back and it's just a common sense kind of thing. The middle, what's the best? No one's ever talked about what is the best for the majority of the Americans, people, because the majority of the American people aren't fighting the far left or the far right. I mean, they want to have they want to have a good life, opportunities that exist at this time. Let's make some common sense, decisions on how we move forward. As life goes on, and we talk about electrical vehicles, we talk about the other aspects of our society, and you go, okay, fine. that'll come. But what's happening now? What are we doing? We're making decisions. So, but how do we support this? And so I, rather than being a strong right or strong left, let's have some discussions. Not that we necessarily need to agree, but at least let's sit down and talk and walk away. And walk away as friends. Hopefully come to a middle ground that we can continue to build this country on. Just within just the crime rate that is taking place and the news that we see. I suppose it's the news that we see, and how it affects our sense of. The question is, where are we going? What are we doing? And that leader just hasn't come to the forefront yet. And I'm not necessarily saying that. There's, politics are politics, and sometimes it gets to a point. For instance, I mean, just so not that it's a big deal, but Social Security. Social Security is a big deal. Social Security is it's based on the fact that for those who work, those who put a money aside, to take care of their needs, as we establish, and that's what Social Security, not to take care of everybody else. I mean, this doesn't seem like, I mean, yes, some people have a job, some people have been in a position to work, but the whole thing was built on the fact that the American people did not necessarily save. So here was a savings account to put something away for the future for you, depending on how you worked and what you've done. So it's my effort, whatever it is, the amount of money that I could put away within Social Security. Well, then we got the whole government thing and using Social Security as there's a pot of gold. Well, we can actually borrow from it, or, and use it. And so now we're in such a state that we'll never be able to get out of Social Security. Now we want to redefine what Social Security is, even for those who had the chance to put money away, and it's a question that goes, that's not fair. We were built on the fact is, okay, we work, we put money away, we set some money aside because we don't believe that you as an American people will save enough money, and that's been true, at times, but at least here's a little pot based on what you don't take it from my pot.
Right. Yeah, I think,
what else? Anyways.
You're touching on a couple of themes that I think are really critical to independence. I think to most Americans, especially to people who aren't, active political participants. You're talking about Social Security. You're talking about Afghanistan. You're talking about oil. You're talking about things that I hear people talk about in their coffee shops and their diners at the gas station, right? And you've always been, I think, kind of a man of the people. And you're talking about fairness. You're talking about leadership, right? You're talking about whether the system's working for everybody. And I think that's the void that we're seeing in this country, right? And I think that's part of why people look to you. I think that's why you resonate in Pennsylvania when we launched this campaign to say, hey, independents should have the right to vote in publicly funded primaries. It's a pretty basic thing, right? It's bullshit. It's bullshit if a guy like you, who's done all that you have done, can't vote in a publicly funded primary. That's not fair. It's not right. It's not American. And I think people won't hear it from a politician. They'll hear it from you because you're trusted. And I think, when people say, independents are going to be spoilers, or they think about Joe Manchin, or they think about Kirsten Sinema, I think real independents are people like you that haven't been overtly political in the past and just talking about common sense. So let me ask you, man, when you think about this future for independence, and I do see leaders starting to come up that are rejecting both parties, and I think a lot of them will come from the military. I think a lot of them will come from sports. Some of them may come from celebrity. You're kind of at the intersection of all of this. And are you optimistic about the future for independence, especially after the work you've been doing in Pennsylvania that really moved the needle?
I don't know. I don't know whether I can state that I'm over enthusiastic about that. It's a movement. So why can't we have a third party? Why can't we have a third independent party? We have Democrats, we can have Republicans, but what builds that party? What builds, so now we, have to get people in place of government officials as an independent thinker of some nature, and now we have to get monetarily support for the middle of the road. I mean, it's be outweighed by sides, Republican or Democratic, and so to some degree, we need to get to that middle of the road situation, and so I don't know how that happens, but as long as we continue to talk about it, I think that becomes important. As long as we can get people that are either Republicans or Democrats that have that mindset of moving towards some middle of the road, acceptance of what needs to be done, well, then maybe we're on the right road.
Rocky, I think it happens when leaders step up. And I think that's what we saw with you. I shared with a lot of folks outside of Pennsylvania, and I said, look, you want to see what an independent looks and sounds like? It's not, Steve Forbes. It's not Andrew Yang. It's not Kirsten Sinema. It's Rocky Bleier.
Yeah.
Rocky Bleier sounds like an independent, and he's someone that people know. You got a lifetime of service. You got a lifetime of leadership. You run businesses, and you've, won Super Bowls. People trust you, and I think that's what the country is looking for. So let me ask you this, even in Pennsylvania, you had someone like Fetterman that kind of is a little bit independent-ish, right? He's still a Democrat, but he was kind of looking like an independent, sounded like a tough guy, right? And then you had, Oz, who came in from outside of politics, and this epic clash. But I think everybody was still looking for something else. Would you ever run for governor or Senate or anything else?
When have people talk about me?
They're talking about you anyway, Ron.
Yeah.
They're talking about you anyway, man.
It was maybe, at one time there was a thought of that possibility, and then you get to a point where you go, okay, it's, matter, maybe, or you get to an age and you go, all right, you might not.
Rocky, it hasn't stopped Biden and Trump. I think they're both older than you.
Well, then you got to, it both. Yeah. Trump isn't, Joe is a couple of years, and then you go, oh my God, then I'd have to wear dark glasses all the time.
All right, well, I'm going to give you an easier one to run with, because it's Super Bowl week. The whole world is watching the Super Bowl. Feels like every day is the Super Bowl of politics, but this is a time, I think, when everybody can come together. Everybody loves the game. They're united in this one common thing we're all watching, and it still feels huge, and it gets people excited. I think we've got this great matchup with the Chiefs and the Steelers. Let me ask you, Rocky, what's your take on the game? And if you're comfortable, make a prediction. How do you see this shaking out?
It's kind of I just kind of view to say the Steelers. But
I'm sorry, did I say the Steelers? Did I say the Steelers? Oh, I got Steelers on the brain, man. I think I told the Steelers masters behind you. Sorry, the Eagles. I don't want to speak of the Eagles. I'm a Giants fan. So I don't even speak of them. Yes, it's the champion of the Eagles. Thank you, Rocky.
That's right. But when it comes down to the game, okay, fine. Somebody's going to have to make a choice somewhere. So you either hate the Eagles, and or you gonna get a root for the Eagles. I mean, I am rooting for the Eagles basically because I think that they deserve to be where they are. They got a great defense, offensively. They've proven themselves. Anything can happen, as we well know. I mean, in a game of this nature, and depends on how Mahone will heal, and how that, and given 2 weeks, he's going to be fine, within the game. So then honestly, then it boils down to that one mistake, or the one misread, or the one tip ball, or the one great play, that changes the direction, the course. And that, I think, is the exciting thing about a game of this nature, especially two teams that have proven themselves to be where they are, has the personnel, and and has a fan base. And so you go, okay, fine. I love to be watching those games and to see who makes the mistake, who comes up with the big play, who's got the one-handed catch, or who makes the great open field tackle or whatever it might be. And it's kind of a test. So, but in this case, I'm just personally, I'm kind of rooting for the Eagles to come out on top.
I still love you despite that. I still love you.
But your team's not in it.
I know, but it's usually, the Giants or anybody who's playing the Eagles, right? I mean, or anybody who's playing the Cowboys. I mean, we could go down the list.
You sound just like politics.
Oh, that's not fun. I will go to the Giants. I am Giants through and through. I'm not going to say, oh, you know what? On this one, I'm on the record. I think the Eagles are going to win. I think they're a fantastic team. They look like a machine, right?
Right.
But I'm not. I'm Giants through and through. I thought about what to wear, and for the folks who are watching on video, I tried to find the old Steelers jersey that Cower gave me, and I couldn't find that. But I did wear a Go Army.
Right?
Because I figured it would be one thing that you and I root for the same team. We root for Army, so I got my Go Army Be Navy shirt on in your honor. Rocky, you're going to stick around for a couple extra questions for our Patreon members. So Patreon members, thank you for your support. Stick around for that. We'll ask them the drink question and others. But Rocky, just maybe last question for you, man. You look back on all the Super Bowls, you look back on your service, you look back on your family and building so many things and contributing in so many ways. What are you most proud of, sir? What are you most proud of when you look back on all that you've done and all that you learned?
Oh, yeah. There's a couple of things. I'm really, the thing I'm most proud of are my kids, and I have to say that, everybody does and so on. But the point is that you look at what you created or, part of and help raise young men and women that go on from here and see what they've done and get them through tough times or that, just the fact of being a dad, so I'm really most proud of it. Or having that opportunity to be able to do that. And I don't want it just as a passing by kind of remark, but I think it's important I think it really is. And I think you ask that to any parent, I don't care what experience you have, but it is, the impact that you have on what you can do with these kids and how they respond, then they get older and then you have arguments. But anyway, you look back at, well, okay, fine. At least they had an argument or they have an opinion or, they're doing what you gave them an opportunity to do and live their lives and become young men and women and hopefully influence. So I'm very fortunate. I got 7 grandkids and my older kids, and I got 2 young ladies that are 23 and 24 in my life at this time. And so it's great to be able to relive those in from that perspective. So yeah, I'm really proud of it.
You have so much to be proud of. And, I was prepping for this conversation and it's like talking to a real life Captain America. I mean, you are the best of what this country is all about. You've been a champion in so many ways. And I'm really grateful that, you've inserted yourself into this independent movement. We've needed a leader that I think transcends so many things. And I think you are a leader in this movement in a way, at a time where we really need it. And you've got that elder statesman experience and that on the ground toughness. And, you're still a grunt at heart and in all the right ways. And it's a tremendous honor to have you on the program, a tremendous honor to know you. And I just want to thank you for all you've done for this country, for your community and for the next generation and so many generations to come. It's a tremendous honor to be able to spend time with you, sir.
Thank you. Thanks, Paul.
And go Chiefs. Stay vigilant, my friend. Stay vigilant, Rocky.